Hello everyone, and welcome to some MiSTer FPGA news. This week we will be talking about a possible 3DO emulator, Outrun's public release, other brand new cores released, and more. So let's get to it. A user on the MiSTer FPGA forums with software engineering experience wants to work on an FPGA implementation for the 3DO game console. Their motivation was to get the game killing time working. It seems like the core development process will be new for them, so if any core comes out of it, it will most likely be in the far future. Also, they will not be using the DE10 Nano. Instead, an FPGA board they are familiar with will be used instead. But if anything comes out of this, and the core is open source, a port to MiSTer should be possible. We shouldn't get too excited about this now, because development hasn't started yet, and like I said before, the developer seems to be new at developing console cores. They've been invited onto the 3DO Discord, where documentation and advice from emulator developers, homebrew developers, and 3DO fans can be provided. Some people believe that the secret core being worked on by Robert, who developed the PlayStation core, is a 3D core, but he actually gave this developer some advice on how to approach development. But it wouldn't surprise me if the secret core is for the 3DO. Multiple developers working on the same core is nothing new. I certainly look forward to finding out. When the 3DO was announced, it really provided some excitement with how video games would progress after the 16-bit generation. It wasn't a successful console, but it did provide some cool exclusive games and awesome ports. David Shadoff, who has worked on several MiSTer FPGA cores, was recently interviewed by the PCFX fan club on YouTube. The topic of creating a PCFX core for the MiSTer FPGA does come up, but overall, it's a really good interview that also dives into other developments that David has made, like an adapter that allows you to use a USB mouse on the PCFX, a non-volatile backup memory board for the PCFX, and more. Pramod, who's working on NARC, had previously posted about needing to do optimizations to get NARC to fit onto the FPGA. He's now been able to get the logic usage down to 84% and can still do more optimizations. Other issues were build times taking too long, but now is getting the core to build in a reasonable time. Darren O has given an update to the progress of the Next Base, an SNK vertical shooter. Most of the work had to do with debugging the video system. It was also mentioned that the game only has sprites and didn't use any tile layers. To me, this sounds like it worked similar to how the Neo Geo hardware worked. That also only used sprites to draw all its graphics. Currently, for the Next Base core, sound or input hasn't been implemented yet. I had previously talked about a developer working on forking MiSTer to make it compatible with other FPGA projects. Hans Bayer, the developer, has made some good progress and gotten some cores already building for the multiple FPGA chips. Cores for BombJack and Qbert are currently available. This alone is a great achievement, but the project is still in early development. From the GitHub, it looks like the boards that these cores are running on are from QM Tech, with one running on the Xilinx RTX 7 and another running on the same Cyclone 5 FPGA that's on the DE10 Nano. But don't go out running and buying these FPGA boards yet. The project is in very early development and isn't very usable yet. After a much needed break, core developer Pierco is back and is working on a new, more simpler core before continuing work on Kick and Run. The new core that's being worked on wasn't mentioned, but to me looks like the arcade game Freeze by Cinematronics. In this game, you play as an astronaut who is stranded on a frozen planet. The goal is to find crystals to repower your ship while facing monsters along the way. Pierco also posted screenshots of other games that work on the same hardware as Freeze, and that we should also be expecting cores for these. These games include Zizix, Jack the Giant Killer, and some card game I don't know. And right during the editing of this video, I took a break and browsed Twitter, and what do I see? I see that Pierco just released cores for these games. On a public Patreon post, you can download the needed files to play Jack the Giant Killer, Super Casino, Freeze, Tri-Pool, and Zizix. Kick and Run, which is the game Pierco is going to continue on working after Freeze, is a 1986 soccer/football game developed by Taito. And if you're still wondering about the Rodland core, don't worry, Pierco mentioned that he will get back to it. If you want to support the work Pierco does, consider supporting his Patreon page. The frame buffer in Outrun has been implemented, and now sprites are fully working. As a result, the core has been promoted to public release, so everyone outside of Jotego's Patreon subscribers can now enjoy this core when using the Update All script. If you check out Jotego's Patreon, you will get the exact details on what the sprite issues were and how he went about fixing it. You'll also get the details on how the frame buffer was implemented using the D10 Nano's DDR RAM. There are a few other things that need to be fixed, which includes a sound bug when cars pass you by, but those bugs don't represent a huge technical hurdle. The Konami CPU design has been completed. The first core Jotego mentioned that will come out of this will be Konami's Haunted Castle, which is an arcade Castlevania game. The Konami CPU was based on Hitachi's 6309, which that in itself was loosely based on the Motorola 6809. This CPU was used in multiple Konami arcade games. I'll provide a link to the GitHub page of the CPU core so you can see a full list of games using it, but some notable games are The Simpsons, Aliens, and Parodius Da. The first CPS3 custom chip has been traced. You can see an image of the traced chip on Jotego's Patreon page. I believe this was accomplished by the process of decapping. Decapping chips will help you physically see the internal gates to show you how a chip works, or give you the ability to see the raw ones and zeros for data chips. All this can help developers document the hardware, develop software and FPGA emulation, and decrypt ROM data. Anton Gale has made the following updates to the Exerion core. Gaps between background layers were removed, the play area was extended, the aspect ratio was updated, and the framework was updated to support Mike Simone's YC video output. A new arcade core has just recently been released by Alan SWX. This one is for Atari's 1980 game, Battlezone. This game used a vector monitor that drew graphics in a completely different way and gave games a unique look. This is a first-person game where you take control of a tank with the goal of destroying all other tanks in the level. Alan SWX also released another core for an Atari Vector arcade game. This one is for the flight game Red Baron, also released in 1980. It's a first-person flight sim game that takes place during World War I, and you take control of a biplane battling other planes. Developer Martin Donlin is getting back to work on the Irem M92 core this week. Looks like a beta release is close, but delays can happen. If I had to guess, when the core does release, the first game that will be available to play will be In the Hunt. That's because earlier this year, Martin showed the core running In the Hunt. It had no sound yet, and there were some alignment issues, but since that post, Martin has been working on the audio system of the hardware. Let's hope no surprises come up and we get a core soon. It was also mentioned that Martin would like to tackle other M boards that are similar to the M92 and M72 boards. Well, it looks like I have another last minute update. I saw that Martin Donlin actually released alpha versions of the M92 core. In this tweet, he mentions that music playback is working, but the audio levels aren't correct, and there are still timing issues. Also, I assume that only In the Hunt would initially be released, but we have a lot of games that are playable. Not all of them, but a lot are. If we check out the GitHub page for the core, we can see MRAs available for a whole bunch of games. We have Blade Master, Gunforce 2, Gunforce, Hook, In the Hunt, Lethal Thunder, Mystic Riders, Ninja Baseball Batman, R-Type Leo, and Undercover Cops. So if you're a fan of any of these cores, you can head on over to the GitHub and download the alpha files onto your MiSTer to play these games. Again, Martin mentions that not all games are working, and I'm not sure which specific ones don't work. But if you try them out, let me know in the comments what's working. So that's it for this week's episode. I provided links to all my sources in the description. Make sure you also check out RetroRGB.com to see my MiSTer News videos in blog form and to get more retro related content. And if possible, support them on Patreon too. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, and if you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button and its bell icon so you can get notified of future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you next time.